Okay, so we're live, and I wanted to thank everybody. We're about to begin a ramen talk and a Q&A with Chef Takahashi-san and myself, Matt Kimura. I'm a food stylist, and a little bit about me. I am a full-time food stylist working on just kind of working on sets, working with food in commercial sets and things like that. And my father owns a Ginkgo Japanese restaurant. So he's had that for 36 years in Toronto. So this is a special talk, part of a ramen weekend, and it's being screened across Canada online, and we can stay connected culturally while staying safe at home. And the talk that we're gonna have about ramen features also a really awesome documentary called Ramen Heads, a film about the king of ramen, Osamu Tomita, and you can catch it after watching this. So before we begin, I want to give thanks to co-presenters, the Embassy of Japan in Canada, the Consul General of Japan in Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, Montreal, and the Japan Foundation, Toronto. Okay, so at the end of this chat, we're going to have a short Q&A session. And so if you want to post a question between now and the end of the chat, you can do that on the YouTube chat, and then we will try to get through and answer some of those questions that you have. Now I'd like to introduce our special guest, Ryuichiro Takahashi-san. He's the chef and owner of Toronto's RYUS Noodle Bar. He's the first Canadian. You got a long list of great things here. He is the first Canadian invitee to set up shop in the exclusive New York City's popular ramen lab. And he has 2 shops in Toronto, and he has 1 in Japan. And he was invited by the Shin Yokohama Ramen Museum in Japan. The first Canadian to be reorganized and in those hallowed halls of the ramen honors. So we're going to start off this slideshow. You can see here we have Ryu-san's Noodle Bar branches and location. And we have 3 popular choices served at Ryu's Noodle Bar. It's the sho ramen, the shoyu, and the tantan men. But these are just a few of the ramens that are served at Ryu's Noodle Bar. In terms of your favorite, there are many kinds of ramen. So what are kind of your favorite core elements of ramen?
Actually, there are 5 basic elements of the ramen. Consist of 5. So usually it's said as noodle, toppings, broth, tare, and aroma oil.
Delicious. How about we start with the noodles? So we know that you have, we were just speaking before, that you have custom-made noodles for your ramen. Mm-hmm. Are there any kind of specific traits? So we're seeing some images of Ryu-san with the noodle maker. Where is he located?
Actually, he is one of my friends. He also made a ramen noodle in New York, but I use from the US also at San Jose. Mm-hmm. The Yamachan.
Amazing. And just for everybody's reference, there is also a small 15-minute documentary on Shimamoto-san's the noodle maker himself, and he makes like a ramen challenge, but it's also informative. So we just wanted to let you guys know about that.
It's very good video, so please see the before after that.
Awesome. Okay, so getting back to those noodle elements, the noodle topping, the broth, the tare, and the aroma. What about the ingredients in the broth that you like using as your base?
Yeah, actually, I usually use showing the presentation, pork, chicken, fish, seaweed, something like that. So, but I'm using the focus on the chicken, Ontario local chicken.
Mm-hmm. This is quite interesting because most ramen broths, and we say traditionally loosely because there's no kind of rules with ramen, but many like to use pork as the base. So it's an interesting and also quite delicious. I've tried it, the chicken broth. And it's also quite a nice thing to know that you can sort of really use Japanese techniques and incorporate them into local Canadian products, which is also a nice thing that you're doing. So why don't we go through? So the broth mains, we have pork, chicken, but then also you use some fish and seafood, correct? In yours?
That's correct. Yeah. I have like two kind of broths usually use it. So one is just only chicken and vegetable broth, and another one is chicken and dried seafood.
Oh, okay. And do you ever
do you
ever combine them together to make one broth, or do you use?
Actually, I will separate the broth, make it separated, and then combine. After.
Okay. And what's the reason for separating two broths?
Okay, good. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm listening. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So usually it's put chicken broth, focus on the one chicken broth, and then makes a very clean chicken broth. I want to make it, and then after I want to make another dried fish brosses. And then so two different kind of brosses. I made it first, and then taste trying. After that, both it's fine for me, and then combine.
Oh, that's amazing. So it sounds like it's a great tool for you to control the flavor from the very beginning all the way to the end. That's very interesting. So if we're looking at the tab, we see chicken bones. We also see dried kelp on your right in the middle, kombu, dried shiitake, and kind of a thicker style katsuobushi, which is smoked, fermented, dried bonito flakes. And then we have mini sardines that are dried. So all these have a lot of flavor. Just a quick question about the process of infusing what we call umami into the flavor of the broth at the beginning. How do you determine when to introduce these ingredients into your broth?
Actually, so for bottom two, dried sardine and then dried bonito, and then put Japanese cuisine usually more thinly slice bonito flakes, right?
Yes.
But I chose one. It's a little bit thicker than usual because I put broth for a long time, and then comes from the more like a richer taste than usual. So that's why I use a thicker dried flakes.
That's interesting. And those ones particularly, I haven't seen too many of them in Toronto. It seems like something that you would have to order from Japan, not those particular ingredients.
Yeah,
that's it. So and the other two that I wanted to just touch on is the kombu, which I find is when I think of Japanese cooking and umami, I think of kombu as the basis. So it's full of amino acids, and it has a lot of flavor enhancing capabilities, and it's quite delicious when used in the broth. And also underrated, in my opinion, is the dried shiitake. So do you want to talk about your veg broth?
Yeah, exactly. I have 7 years ago, I set up the own restaurant in Toronto, right? And then focus on vegetarian customer as well. So I have first of all, I two kinds of a broth. One is a richer chicken broth, and one is a vegetable broth as well. So, and then just use it for the dried kelp seaweed, and then also shiitake mushroom broth as well.
That's delicious. Okay, why don't we move on to the tare? So the tare is the sauce. So if we want to think you have a broth, that's a base that you've been working on. So the tare is essentially how people are going to flavor, the base flavor inside the broth, right?
Exactly. So direction, actually. Direction of the taste.
The direction of the taste. That's a good way of putting it. So when we say we have shoyu, soy sauce based, a miso based, shio, which is salt, and a spicy paste. And we were talking the last time we had a chance to chat about the type of shoyu that you use. It's not necessarily a shoyu that you just pick up and buy in the store. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yep.
In terms of the quality.
Yeah, actually, shoyu is so many kinds of shoyu we have, right? So sometimes I focus on very special shoyu, and then nowadays I use for the saishikomi in Japanese. Like as I say, what can I say?
So saishikomi would be the first pressing of the shoyu. So we can also think of that. You know, if we want to take kind of another European term, it would be like if you were to use like similar, but the first pressing of olive oil kind of has that similar type of idea that the quality that comes out of saishikomi shoyu is the most full flavored bodied shoyu that you can buy.
Yeah, so actually shoyu originally from the soybean, wheat, and then salted water and the koji. Right. So how can I explain the koji?
Koji is it's a type of mold that is usually created from molding rice, and it's like a healthy bacteria. So it's a starter of healthy bacteria mold, which is very flavorful. And it is actually, when you talk about koji, it's the underlying ingredient that ferments all of the different flavors. So there's koji in miso and shoyu, right?
So regular shoyu actually use for salted water, but the saishikomi shoyu use like a raw shoyu, as a fresh shoyu actually.
Oh, okay.
So that means that like a shoyu made original shoyu, so it's a double.
Right.
That's
I find
more
that
like
quite interesting.
Yeah.
I find that very interesting because you know, when you just go to the grocery store and you look at soy sauce, a lot of people don't understand that there are different qualities and they don't understand how to get those, and those things are a little bit less available in Canada just because of the cost, right? It's very expensive.
Yeah, actually, right. 2, 4, 3, more and more times than usual.
And we'll talk about the miso that you use.
Miso, I use like 4 kinds, and then shiro, aka, and then also more sweeter like a saikyo, and also koji and mame koji miso bean paste.
That's interesting. So you create your own blend using different types of miso to find balance. You know, the thing that I always find interesting about your ramen is it's got a very nice balance. So you get your flavor, you get all the toppings, the richness of the broth, but then, you know, how it works with the noodles is all things that you consider, right? Which is, I find so delicious. So for people looking on the screen, you can see some of the different ingredients. We have some chili pepper, dried. So you make your own ryu sauce out of this, but also you use this as a paste, right? So you use it 2 ways, I guess, would you say? Would you use it?
No, this one, right? So it's a 2 ryu, and then ryu, and also miso bean paste, 2 kinds of miso bean paste on top of the left.
Right.
The center actually, center one actually I made a shio dare. It's a salt-based sauce.
Oh, kind of like a mother sauce.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so
it's
you
one of my best focus on this also.
Okay, how old is that one?
Sorry.
How old is this sauce? Are you still just replenishing it like as you go, or you start from the beginning?
Yeah, I start from the beginning, and then it takes maybe it's so 1 or 2. So how many times I forgot to made it makes like a trial.
Right.
I forgot. Yeah.
That's amazing. And then on the right hand side, we see a flame. And that's a Japanese technique called nikiri. So it's a flambe technique where you're burning off the alcohol inside any of like the sake, mirin, and that's inside, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is great. That's great. It kind of gets gives you burns off the alcohol and gives you a little bit more of a cleaner taste. So so that's kind of a way for people to understand it. When you go to a ramen shop, you can order based on the tare, right? You can order sometimes based on the broth too. Like they have you have 2 kinds of broth at your place. You can do a vegetarian style, right? And then you can also do the chicken broth. And then from there, you choose your tare, which would be your flavor profile.
Exactly.
I find that quite fascinating.
Yeah, you got it.
So moving on to the next element, aroma oil. So this to me is a very interesting. Why don't you take us through your idea about aroma oil?
Aroma oil actually a little bit different. Lots of fresh ingredients, strong flavor found in the garlic, ginger, shrimp, like a chili, and something like that. And then aroma is a first impression of the taste, I think. That's why one of the very important element for the ramen.
Interesting. Yeah. So, and that's also like a technique that you've gotten not just from Japanese cooking, but from other elements as well, right?
Exactly.
Which I find is interesting. So that, I mean, you know, in this particular case, you use these base elements to create oils that are very flavorful. And one of the things that you do that I find interesting to get that depth of flavor is you use a lot of dried ingredients, right? So when you see chili and shrimp, it's dried, right?
Exactly, yes.
Now, ginger, you said you would use raw, but also ginger is quite strong in flavor, right?
Sometimes I use a powder as well.
Okay, depending on the taste and the strength of the ginger,
yeah,
would you
exactly,
say?
Yeah.
So that's very interesting, that the things that people, that chefs do behind the scenes that nobody ever thinks about is making adjustments to the flavor depending on the ingredients, which I think is such an awesome thing that people can think about when they're eating the ramen. So yeah, when we talk about, one of the things about these fortified ingredients, and you can kind of draw comparisons as well, like it's not an oil, but you know, when you make a tomato sauce and you throw basil in it, it creates that aroma of smell that you get, right? And so that's kind of an awesome thing. And you can order, I think in the past you've done truffle as well.
Yeah,
truffle oils.
Yeah, so from the first time, my restaurant, from the first time, I use truffle oil as well, because the truffle oil and then my miso is so very good marriage, actually.
Right. And that's also a trend that we're starting to see even in Japan. We see a lot of people experimenting with the truffle as an ingredient. So that's quite nice that you have that as an option for people.
It's trend actually in Japan too.
It is, yes, yeah. So in terms of your ramen concept, moving on. So we heard them before, but you want to talk about your this concept. I find is quite fascinating and also not really easy to understand sometimes for people. But if you want to just give us like a kind of a basic explanation of your philosophy here.
Yeah, okay. So I'm not actually a scientist, but I focus on the umami five taste of the elements. So as you may know, so it's a kombu from the I don't know, glutamine acid from the like a kombu seaweed,
right?
Or like a tomato as well. And the inosine acid is usually from the chicken or bonito or so. And the
More
pork
of a
as well.
protein.
Yeah, protein as well. And then
Okay.
granule from the shiitake mushroom. And they mixed up the together, and then I made like a more good taste for my ramen, I think. So that's why I focus on the like 5 kinds of the umami.
It's really interesting. You said earlier that you're not a scientist, but like a lot of these concepts are very scientific. They're involved. We don't, as chefs and cooks, we don't normally think of ourselves as scientists, but there's a lot of play involved and creativity to develop the flavor. So this is, I think this is quite fascinating for people because umami is such an interesting word. A lot of Canadians are learning about umami now. And to see the level of different types of umami that you're combining is quite interesting. It's not all the same. It can be drawn from different areas. That's delicious. Okay, well, that was really great insight. So thank you so much for sharing these ideas with us. And we urge anybody to, if you have any questions, please feel free to send us a question. I just have a couple questions not off topic, but I know we mentioned just as a personal thing, gyoza that you work with. A lot of ramen shops in Canada, they use gyoza that they deep fry, and you use the traditional way, which is pan fry steam. And I love that.
I love the pan fried dumplings, so gyoza dumplings. So that's why my restaurant use pan fried way. So because
when I think of traditional, it's always in restaurants,
style,
right? Yeah,
exactly.
And another just a off question that I have about the noodles. So you have thin and thick at your restaurant, right? So how do you determine? Like, you can obviously, the customer can pick, but you have preferences. So how do you determine the preferences for the noodles?
My restaurant customer choose both of them. It depends on the customer, but I recommend thicker broth for the thicker noodle, and then more lighter and more clear broth for the thin noodle, because it's lifted up from the noodle, and then too much sometimes because some people you order for the miso with the thin noodle, and too much lifted up like a noodle from the broth, and then taste more like too much richer.
Right.
That's why I recommend to choose one the thin noodle and the clear broth, and then thick noodle for the rich broth. So I recommend. And also it depends. It depends on it.
Right. So like a thicker broth might be an example like of skimen, which is
skimen, yes.
Yeah. So that's a dipping sauce style ramen, and they're very thick. Correct?
Yeah, correct, exactly. Yeah. And then also I want to customer enjoy my noodle flavor, like a wheat flavor. I use 2 kinds of the flavor. I know flour. One is like a whole wheat, one is like a grinded whole wheat. So like a flavor of more like flavorful.
Right. It's got more actual flavor in the actual noodle itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Correct?
Yeah.
I find that quite fascinating. When we talk about noodles, like, how did you come up with that? Did you try a bunch of different flour for your noodles, or how did that work?
Yeah, I also went to the noodle makers and then see what's difference for the wheat. And then, of course, I trust them to make the noodle. And then I trust, and they chose the 3 or 4 kinds of the flour. And then I chose one.
Interesting. And you know, we kind of glazed over it, but you had a very big opportunity to do the ramen shop in Japan. And can you explain to us a little bit about being the first Canadian to operate inside the ramen museum?
Usually it's two kinds of the restaurant going from the abroad. And then nowadays, me and from the Canada and another one from the Germany. And they both like little bit different than Japanese regular ramen noodle shop. And
Right.
I focus on the like chicken, but Ontario chicken, right? So very, very difficult to made from the made for Japan. Because I usually use like Ontario chicken, right? I didn't use for the Japanese chicken.
Right.
And then this means like so difficult for me to make at the same time. But it takes like 1 week or 2 weeks that adjusted for the chicken bone. So many kinds of chicken bone in front of me. So from the like Tohoku district to like a Kyushu district. And then so I think it's 7 or 8 kinds of the chicken bone in front of me. And then I choose like a couple of the bone. And then I decided it means like so it takes us so long time.
That's very interesting. So so it really matters where you get your ingredients that determines the base flavor of something. I think one of the reasons that, you know, people find ramen so fascinating is that you have this bowl in front of you and it's beautiful presentation, and you go and sip into it with the broth, and then you slurp the noodles. You're getting all of that flavor, the aroma, the tare, everything happens all at once. And I think that's such an incredible thing. It's such a heartwarming thing, and people, it's great that people all over Canada are really, really taking to this ramen movement. Well, that's excellent. Oh,
one people said, okay, so one people said that like the ramen means like a perfect meal for the people, because there's so many, almost every kind of things inside the bowl, right? So like a protein, broth, flavor, so people enjoy, and then also it like every nutrition is also it's perfect. So that's it.
Awesome. So we got one question here, and it's they want to go back. Somebody is curious about the aroma oils. Can you please describe your process for preparing the aromatic oils that you use?
So which one actually? It's a dried seafood.
Why don't we start with the dried one? Maybe the shrimp oil.
Now, dried shrimp, I usually use like grapeseed oil, or like clear sesame oil. I usually use it, and then not too much heat, like a low temperature, and it's so long time, takes a long time, and then at least I think it's 30 minutes.
Wow. So by slow extracting, that's the key to getting the right flavor out, right? So if you overheat something, you lose the flavor of what you're trying to extract. It burns.
It's
right.
Burned.
Yeah, that's interesting. And grapeseed oil and light sesame seed oil, those are very clean oils, right? Exactly. So you're trying to find a clean base, and also
not too much flavor. Sometimes people try to use like olive oil, like extra virgin olive oil. It's too much flavor, I think. So that's why I chose like grapeseed oil instead of the extra virgin oil.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm just going to pull up the next question. Okay, so for someone who's staying at home who wants to make ramen from ingredients from local supermarkets, what are the key things to consider to make a good bowl of ramen?
In home, right?
At home. So if you're at home and you're not close to Ryu Ramen, you're like, let's say you're in Pickering or something like that, you're far away, or you're in you're in North Vancouver. Where can you get what would be, if you want to make you're craving ramen, how do you go about that? What would you do?
So How do they get my ramen, or like how do?
I think for this, it's more of a simple like how could they make a not the same version of yours, but how could they go
Okay.
about making a good version of
Good
ramen?
version. Okay. So I think it's easy is chicken broth. Chicken broth is more easy than usual, I think. Because my ramen, I said it's rich broth and then clear broth, right? Rich broth
Right.
takes it's a long time and so high calorie burner they need.
Right.
So that's why I recommend the clear chicken broth.
Right. Okay.
Also, it takes a time, little bit, but household equipment and also can make it clear broth as well, because it's so not so much heating is needed.
Right. So I mean, people could follow a like a basic chicken soup recipe or chicken stock recipe, and they can start from there using their local ingredients to make some soup. But yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Once they actually wash it and then to remove, it depends on the thinking about the broth. Of course, it depends on the people. It depends on the chef. Yeah, of course.
Right.
But my method is a little bit takes like dirty blood or dirty like, inside meat. I take everything out and then so put water and also sometimes little bit smell is I wanna take remove the
impurities.
Yeah, exactly. So
right.
And put like a ginger, garlic, and onion, green onion as well.
So when you do that, you're removing the impurities, but you're also making just like those add a lot of delicious flavor to the broth as well.
And more clean, more clean.
And clean. That's interesting. Okay. All right. Well, that's excellent. So thank you so much, Yu-san, for your time.
Thank you very much.
If you have a chance to post, or for those on social media, like please share your favorite ramen memory or pick, and you can tag Stay Home Eat Ramen. So we have that up for you, so you can take a look. Also, the link for the Ramen Heads documentary, we really urge you all to see that. And it's going to be available. The documentary is available until 9 p.m. tonight. So thank you so much, Yu-san, and thank you for all the partners involved. ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございます。